Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the CEO of BuellerFootball.com, host of the Football GM podcast, and the Director of Player Personnel for the Seattle Dragons of the XFL. Please welcome Randy Mueller to the program. Randy, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me back. I always enjoy our discussions, so I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, thanks for being here. How'd the XFL come up first off? Sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah, the XFL has been good to me. You know, I was involved in 2.0 and building the Houston team that was 5-0, and we had a lot of fun. And had it not been for the pandemic, I think we would have carried right through and probably been in year 3 now. But the relaunch by The Rock and Danny Garcia has made it a lot of fun, and it's been an entertaining process for me to this point. We're just starting to build our teams out this summer, and we'll have players that are final cut types in the NFL. So. It's fun to work with Jim Haslett, June Jones, some of my guys that I've been around forever, and we're going to have a good group in Seattle. So it's as much about the people as anything for me.
I assume that prompted you to take this position, too, knowing you're going to be working with guys you've worked with in the NFL before.
Yeah, no question. It was a big selling point for me. Coach Haslett and I had a good combination in New Orleans. We led them to some success down there. And with June and I, June was the head coach of the Houston team in the XFL last time, and I've known him forever. So, yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. Plus, it's in Seattle, right? And that's where I live. That's home for me. So it's a home game. Like somebody said the other day, they said, you can build the team from your deck in Seattle. So I said, yeah, it's hard to turn down.
How do you feel about this new opportunity?
I feel great about it. We've had showcases all summer, which are really like combines, mini combines. We've had 6 of them throughout the country, but we are able to pick players that are on the street right now. But I think the majority of our players will come from NFL cuts. And as we go further into the fall, the process is long. It's arduous. We don't have NFL staff, so it's not like in the olden days where you'd have 20 people that could find information from and with. It is the one-man shows in the personnel department, but I like it. It is scouting at its purest, John. And like I say, when you build teams for a living and have your whole life, to be able to check the box of doing it from scratch, I think everybody should have to do that, because you sure learn a lot from it. And it's made me way better at my job in just building these spring league teams from scratch.
What's going to be criteria evaluating each player you end up making?
I think it depends on the coach's schemes and what we're going to do with them. That's the fun part about it, is we can write the criteria however we want. So when I sit down with June, I sit down with Jim, I sit down with Ron Zook on defense, these are our coordinators. We've kind of designed exactly the player we're looking for because we know what we're going to do with them. You don't necessarily get a chance to do that in the NFL. This is really tailor-made for exactly, we're going to put these players in positions that accentuate their strengths and not so concerned about their weaknesses, because if they're in those positions, that's our fault. So we can design by position exactly what we want, and depending on how we set things up, I think we'll be able to fit into our scheme players that have skill sets that match.
What's your team philosophy regarding scheme offensively and defensively?
Well, on offense, we'll run Jim Jones's run and shoot offense. It'll be a version of the spread of the air raid type offense, and we did it in Houston. June's done it forever. He was really the godfather of it, teaming with Mouse Davis back in the late 70s, early 80s. So it was a lot of fun. I'd never been around that system, John, before till I got to Houston. I only kind of knew the NFL ways. It enlightened me. It was fun to find players for it. It was exciting for our players to play in it. And then defensively, we'll run a multiple, front. But Jim and Ron Zook and I together in New Orleans, we built a 3-4 scheme where we had outside backers that really are pass rushers. And that's probably what we'll do with this group. It's a matter of finding a couple big nose guys to put inside to maybe 2 gap, and then find some rushers on the edge. So it'll be an interesting process to fit the guys who we find in these schemes, but I think we can do it, and I think it's going to be fun.
Do you have guys in mind right now, or have guys on your team or on your roster to fulfill those roles?
Yeah, we don't have a roster right now. Our draft is going to be in November, and I have a lot of guys in mind. And in fact, if we had a draft tomorrow, I've got a draft board already that I would be able to use, and I think it would be fun to pick players from it. like I said, I think the further we get into the fall, John, we'll get better players, a quality that's just been released by the NFL or by these teams, on and off practice squads. Those kind of players is where we'll end up. So I think as we go through the fall, the quality of player we will find is good. But I will say this year's draft class, John, because of COVID, because of the sixth year being allowed by the NCAA, it was an enormous class. And it was really good in quality. And I've been doing this for a long time. I've never seen a group of players as good right now on the street that has not even been looked at by the NFL. They just don't have time or roster spots for all of these guys. You might have 300 kids that you're interested in an NFL facility during the course of a draft cycle. Well, this year that's 500, 550 because of all the players that were in for 6-year graduate transfers, all because of COVID. So it's a good time to be building a team, and there's going to be a lot of young guys that get opportunities because of it.
Where do you stand on expectations at that point?
What? I'm sorry, I lost you.
Where do you stand on expectations at this point for your team?
Well, I think for us, we're going to build a team that suits us good. The XFL has a media rights contract with ABC and with ESPN, so it's a Disney contract. Our expectations will be, I think, high in that we're going to be right under NFL standards. That's the kind of team we're going to build. We're looking for NFL-type players that just don't have the right fit or opportunity at the NFL level. And I think the quality of play will be as good, if not better, than anything you've seen in the spring, especially the last couple of years. I thought we did a good job in XFL 2.0 of putting a really good product on the field. I think it's even going to be better this year because the quality of players that I'm finding already are higher than we even did 2 years ago.
What's your goal for this team personally, Randy?
Well, mine is to give players an opportunity to go to the NFL, to fulfill their dreams, to go to their next level, to go from being, as The Rock says, player number 54 on a 53-man roster, to give them an opportunity to make an NFL team. And I think we can do that. We have experienced staff. We have really good coaches. We're going to put these players in positions that I think the NFL will really be able to evaluate them, even more so than in college programs at times. So I think that will be an expectation that we'd love to fulfill. And if we have 10 or 15 NFL players on our team at the end of it that get opportunities, I think that would be good. Plus the competitive value that, it'll be a good TV product. People will watch it. And I think the winning and the competitive nature will come out. And then again, that's what we're all wired to do, right? We want to win it, whatever it is.
Well, I appreciate the fact that number one is to number two, it's winning, if I hear you correctly. I think that's the main point of the XFL and a lot of these other sports that you see popping up.
Yeah, I think all of the factors are part of it. I think winning, though, at the end of the day is what drives us all. And I think we're going to do everything we can. At some point, right now, we're doing what's best for the league and the 8 teams. At some point, we're going to shift gears and we're going to do what's best for Seattle to win as many games as we can. So that competitive spirit will come out. The coaches are already feeling, I can tell that already. But we're making our way through a long process. Having done this a couple times, I can kind of forecast the expectations and really manage those a little bit as we get further into it. It's going to be fun. We're going to have our hub in Dallas, John, and all 8 teams are going to be in Dallas. But we're going to fly to the teams. We're going to fly to the cities to play games. So that's really the way it's set up.
Randy Mueller here on Talk Chicago. Let's talk some NFL now, starting with the Bears. What do you make of them at this point?
I think the Bears are, again, a work in progress. I think Ryan Poles would tell you that. I've been in that seat before. The expectations, he probably doesn't have to manage those much. They're building, they're kind of putting their philosophies in place. He and the coach have a lot of, getting to know each other. They've had 3 months now. Now they can see what they've done so far on the field, especially these first few days. So I think it's a fun time. I've been there. It's exciting. You're never happy with your roster, especially that first year or two. So my guess is Ryan's grinding and his staff still grinding, trying to find a player here or there and to add to it. I think they're always going to be looking, especially these first couple of years. They're in a tough spot, division. Obviously, everybody's trying to catch the Packers. So I think sometimes being the underdog, we were in a similar place in New Orleans in 2000. Nobody expected us to come back in after a 4-12 year and win the division, and we did. So they might be able to sneak up on a couple teams. And hey, if you're around 500 at Thanksgiving, you got a chance. So if I'm them, that's probably my goal.
How patient Bears fans be? How much time should they give him to develop a roster and his team a winner?
Well, I think patience is dwindling nowadays in society, right? Everybody wants the hot take and wants results now. But I think you've got to give these guys a year or two to kind of get their people, especially when you change fronts on defense. That's a process in itself. When you're shifting guys around up front in your front seven, that's hard to fill those spots with players that have been signed for another system. Offensively, they're probably going to be as good as the quarterback will take. Justin Fields is the key. He hopefully last year was the floor, and he builds on that this year. A lot of questions. We'll see. I mean, a lot of people think they should have done more on offense. Maybe he'll be better though. I think the system will be better for him. So they have a lot of growing pains. I think he'll overcome. So if I'm a Bear fan, I'm patient, but I'm always going to want to see progress. Maybe it doesn't start until week 1, and then we see where we are in increments, like week 4, week 8, week 12. That's how I would judge this team: is are we getting better? Are we functional? Are we efficient? Are we making dumb penalties? Things like that have to factor in, and that can be measured in baby steps. It doesn't have to be in wins and losses.
Are you concerned about Justin Fields having to adjust to a new offense? Should that be an issue or something to worry about?
I don't think it's an issue or something to worry about. It's going to be hard for him because anytime you're memorizing a playbook or learning something totally new, you don't get to develop your skills at level 2 and 3 and 4. So you're back to square one learning. So initially, it's going to be a little bit of a setback. We'll see how fast he catches on. But hey, they always say the best thing about a freshman is when he becomes a sophomore and a junior. And it's just the process of learning, especially at quarterback. I was one in college, and there's no way I could have played as a freshman. I went from the dock of the bay to the Autobahn, and that's probably what last year he felt like. So he's going to have to this year. The speed of the game will slow down for him, but he's still got to get all of his – he's got to know what he's doing before he can develop, if that makes any sense. And that takes time.
Do you think that philosophy could apply to Trey Lance, for instance, in San Francisco, sitting out an extra year? Is that something that could be applied to your college experience itself?
Yeah, I guess the good news for Trey Lance is it's the same system. So he should be further ahead. He hasn't had to reprogram to a new coach, a new offensive system altogether. He should be further along in the learning process. Now, having said that, I think he had further to come than Justin Fields when they came out, because Trey hadn't thrown that many balls. He hadn't been playing against Michigan and USC and some of these top programs like Justin Fields had. So there's a period of adjustment there, but it's different. I think that's probably why they want to speed the clock up on him, and why Kyle's okay with turning the page from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance, is that they got to get him in there. They got to get him time. He's in year 2 of what they hope is a 5-year deal. So they're trying to get the team built around him while the contract numbers are still good for Trey Lance.
Is that something you would do as a GM, something to advocate for, that situation?
Well, it'd be hard for me to do what the 49ers are doing, I'll be honest with you. You've got a team and a locker room of veteran players really that is built to win a Super Bowl right now, and at least a playoff team. Turning it over to a young guy is tenuous, because I think you're going to take a step back initially. I really do. I think in the 49ers case, putting Trey Lance in ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe it has a higher ceiling, but I've not seen one of these things transfer power without taking a step or two back to start with. And most veterans don't want to hear that. They want to get ready for the playoffs. And I think if you polled the veterans in the 49er locker room, they'd all say they'd rather have Jimmy G right now. But I get it, in that he may have a lower ceiling. Trey Lance can take them further. It's just not going to come without some errors and some trial and error and just fighting to get the experience and the speed of the game. Some things that Justin Fields should already have, Trey Lance is going to have to catch up to get.
Understand about the situation, and maybe you some insight, is that Jimmy Garoppolo was one game away from them to the Super Bowl. Is it beneficial now to tear all that down and start from scratch?
Well, in my opinion, they've deemed Jimmy to have fatal flaws, and that's the only reason you could make a deal like this. They had to have said, hey, his flaws are too much for us to overcome. We can't build the team around him that's going to get us to the Super Bowl. You can argue that view, and you can argue that point. I'm not sure I could make a case for it, but they clearly did when they gave away all the capital last year they did to move up to get Trey Lance. So philosophically, I said from day one, I credit John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. They've got guts. I could not have done that. I think I would have done it a little different. But hey, they're with Jimmy every day. They saw some things in Trey Lance that a lot of us seasoned evaluators didn't see. So I got to give them credit if it comes through.
Randy Mueller here on Sports Talk Chicago. Randy, a few more core questions before we finish up. First, studying. Does Kyle's contract make any sense to you?
You know, I've tried to make sense of it, John. I've thought long and hard before even making a comment on it. I've never seen anything like it. I can't even really compare it to anything that I've ever been a part of. I just think it causes more problems than it's worth. Just the fact that they don't trust this kid now and they have to put this kind of stuff in his contract, and it confirms some of the things that the analysts have been saying for 2 years now, or 3 years, that maybe the intangibles aren't there. That's one of the reasons he hasn't progressed. I don't buy the fact that he's gotten better every year. I don't see that. I see the same guy that was in college playing now and doing the same thing. So, I don't know. Maybe it can be turned into a win-win, but the circus that it has caused has to, in my opinion, kind of infiltrate into the locker room. And I don't know that this does a lot for Kyler Murray in the locker room. This guy's already supposed to be the leader of our, not only franchise, but of our city. That's usually the way these NFL quarterbacks become. Now he's been questioned by his own people to watch video. And not only that, to the details behind what they did to get him to watch video 4 hours a week, which is comical in itself. Most of these guys watch 4 or 5 hours a day. I'll compare this to Phillip Rivers when we moved from San Diego to LA. He outfitted a whole van with video equipment so he could watch tape all day, every day, going up to LA to practice and going back to San Diego at night. So there's his 4 hours a day that he watched video. So it's just different. And again, maybe Kyler can get by doing it like this. I just haven't seen the progress on the field, so it makes me question all this. This just confirms the questioning that I had, to be honest with you.
What kind of a message does this send about Murray? I mean, obviously he's not studious enough to be a quarterback long term.
Well, I think it's a doubling down on Cliff Kingsbury and his style and his scheme. That's what I think it's all about. Hey, if Cliff Kingsbury wasn't the head coach of the Cardinals the year Kyler came out, I would not bet that he would have been the first pick in the draft. There's not a lot of NFL teams looking for 5'9", and some of the things that Kyler does. That's just not part of the criteria. Cliff made that vogue and said, "This is what I want." So we'll see. I view it a little bit as that. Cliff and him share the same agent. That's problematic in itself. And so they both were rewarded long-term contract extensions now. So we'll see. But I think part of it is a doubling down on Cliff. It's factual that they've struggled in the last half of seasons, the last 2 years. If you go back to Cliff's college career, they struggled at Texas Tech the last half of his seasons as well. And I've always said the NFL especially is a coach's game the last half of the season. You make adjustments. People have seen the tape. You can come up with new stuff. And I just haven't seen that from Arizona. So it'll be interesting. The negative part with Kyler is because he's such a small guy, durability is a factor as well. Now, I understand, and this is a plus, in part of that contract, they built in some roster bonuses built on him being dressed for games. So that, to me, was insurance against health and him playing, which is another question mark, the fact that you got to put it in there, but at least the Cardinals put that in there to protect themselves. If he doesn't dress for X amount of games, he doesn't get certain roster bonuses, and the guarantees have a equaling effect there, too. So they built in some protection. It's created a lot of doubt in the contract itself and in turn in the player. So we'll see.
How worried would you be if this was your quarterback?
Well, I would not have progressed down this road as far. That's just me. I'm old school, and my criteria is totally different than what they've selected to be their quarterback. I think the NFL finds a way to keep you in the pocket. Defensive coaches are really good, and eventually they're going to keep you from running around. And you have to process and win from the pocket to be able to make all the throws to be successful long-term and sustainable in the NFL. I just haven't seen that from Kyler yet, but I didn't see that in college either. So that's why I say their criteria is a little bit different than those of us who have lived in the NFL forever.
Randy, before we finish up today, last question. What's the craziest contract clause you've seen or been a part of?
Well, I think I haven't really been a part of too many crazy things, but I will say this. In Seattle for 20 years, we had to incentivize our players to hang around in the off season because they all wanted to head to the south. They all wanted to get to the sunshine. None of them really wanted to stay there in the wintertime to work out. So we put substantial money in most of our guys' contracts that mandated them to stay in Seattle and work out. And one year, Cortez Kennedy, God bless him, one of my favorite people in the world, like a son to me, he had $1 million bonus in his contract to work out. But what I did when we negotiated the contract, I just took $1 million off the base salary that he was going to get throughout the course of the season and advanced it to him early if he'd work out 12 weeks in the offseason with us. So it didn't cost us any more money. It just moved some money up. And he wanted that $1 million. So he was there every day. He was there on time. It was insurance against a big guy like him being in shape. So I don't think it was crazy, but it was at the time not the norm. I do know that Green Bay did some of this. I don't know about Chicago. Some of the northern cities had to incentivize their players to stay in and stay around and work out. And then the pushback from that always was, well, you're paying guys to do their job. You're paying them extra to do what they were, what they're supposed to do anyway. It really didn't matter to me like that because I just took the money off the base and moved it forward. They were going to get it anyway. It was just like an advance, and it worked for us as insurance against players staying in shape and being ready to go when training camp came around.
Wow, that is interesting philosophy. It worked out, though.
Yeah, it worked out great. And we had a full crew of guys in the offseason, which helped us recruit more guys, which helped us in free agency because our guys were around. And I think it helped our team build as well because guys spend a lot of time around each other.
Well, Randy, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure. Best wishes for the XFL this season until we catch up and talk about it as the season comes closer.
Thanks, John. Anytime. Always good to be on with you.